The black exhaust smoke from the buses choked my throat, while I watched the taillights of my daughter's car fade into the traffic without looking back even a single time. I am Eleanor. I am 78 years old. I was the most sought-after seamstress in the capital, and my eyes have seen more hypocrisy than fine fabrics. They think I am an old rag they can discard, but they forgot that I know the exact point where the thread of their inheritance breaks. The 2 p.m. sun beat down like a hammer on the dirty asphalt of the bus terminal. It was a sticky heat, the kind that crawls under your clothes and makes you feel heavier, older. Beside me, on a floor stained with grease and ancient chewing gum, sat a blue plastic suitcase. It wasn't mine. It was one that Monica, my eldest daughter, had bought on clearance at a supermarket 2 days ago. "Packing light is better for the trip, Mom," she had told me, wearing that crooked smile she gets when she lies. Inside that ridiculous suitcase was, according to them, my entire life. 3 cotton dresses, my blood pressure medication, a pair of orthopedic shoes, and a framed photo of my late husband, Albert. That was all that, in their judgment, I needed to go die far away. "Stay right here, Mom. Don't move," Valerie, my middle child, had told me barely 10 minutes ago. She didn't even step out of the car to give me a hug. She just rolled down the window, the air conditioning blasting her in the face, and handed me a crumpled ticket. "The bus leaves at 5. Up in St. Jude's, there's a really good home run by nuns. You'll have a better place there, where you won't be in the way. We just don't fit in the house anymore. You know how the kids are. You are in the way." Those words echoed in my head, louder than the horns of the buses pulling in and out. I sat down on a metal bench that burned my skin. People rushed past, dragging bags, shouting names, eating junk food. Nobody noticed the white-haired old woman, her hair perfectly pinned in a bun, wearing a pearl gray tailored suit I had made for myself 15 years ago. A suit that, unlike their consciences, remained impeccable. I looked at the ticket in my hand. St. Jude's, a godforsaken town 6 hours away down dirt roads. A place where they dump the old folks who are no longer useful for babysitting or handing over their pension checks. My 3 daughters, Monica, Valerie, and Susan. The 3 little girls I dressed in silk and lace back when we couldn't even afford to eat meat every day. The 3 women whose college tuition I paid by sewing until my fingers were covered in calluses and my vision blurred. They thought old age had made me stupid. They thought my silence over the last few months while they divvied up my furniture and argued over what to do with my house was a sign of dementia. Poor fools. A seamstress's silence isn't empty. It's concentration. When you sew, you stay quiet so the stitch comes out straight. And I had been basting a plan for months, even though I didn't expect the final blow to be as brutal as leaving me stranded in a 4th-rate bus terminal. Susan, the youngest, my absolute favorite, was in the back seat of the car. I saw her in the rearview mirror before they made me get out. Her eyes were glued to her phone. She didn't even look up to see her mother standing alone on the curb with a plastic suitcase. That was what hurt the most. Indifference hurts more than hate. Hate at least requires passion. Indifference is like, you're already dead. An hour passed. The heat pressed down and my mouth felt as dry as a desert. A street vendor walked by shouting, "Water, soda, ice-cold water." I dug into my purse. Monica had left me a $5 bill and some loose change. "So you can buy something on the road," she had said, like it was some grand act of charity. I bought a bottle of warm water. I drank it slowly, counting every sip, because I knew the wait was going to be long. My mind started drifting backward, not out of nostalgia, but to review my mistakes. At what exact moment did I raise 3 vultures? Maybe it was when Albert died, and I tried to make up for his absence by giving them everything. "I don't want them to suffer," I would tell myself while working 16-hour days in my shop. I gave them everything, and by giving them everything, I stripped them of the ability to be grateful. I remembered last week. I was in my armchair, that green velvet one that Monica's daughter-in-law likes so much, pretending to be asleep. They were in the dining room. "I can't stand her anymore," Valerie was saying. "She smells old, she walks slow, and the other day she almost dropped the soup. My kids are scared of her." The house is huge, but she takes up the best room, the one downstairs, Monica replied. If we kick her out, we can knock down the wall and expand the living room. It would be gorgeous for parties. And where do we send her? Susan asked, using that soft little voice that fools everybody. Far away, Monica declared. Somewhere she won't be a bother. There are cheap places out in the country. We'll tell her it's a spiritual retreat or something. It's not like she even notices anything anymore. I noticed everything. I noticed they had forged my signature to try and sell the plot of land down south. I noticed they were stealing my jewelry piece by piece. Grandma probably lost it, they'd say. And I stayed quiet. I stayed quiet and I watched exactly the way you look for a flaw in a piece of fabric before you make the cut. 3 hours went by. The sun started to dip, but the heat didn't let up. My legs, swollen from bad circulation, started to throb. A stray dog, skinny and mangy, wandered over to sniff my shoes. I petted his head. He had more humanity in his sad eyes than my 3 daughters combined. Poor mother, said a heavy-set woman who sat down next to me loaded with shopping bags. Did they stand you up? No, ma'am, I answered, using my firm voice, the one I used to negotiate with fabric suppliers. I'm just waiting for my ride. Oh, good. There's a lot of evil out here. People come and leave folks stranded like garbage. May God punish them. I smiled faintly. God takes his time, I thought. Sometimes you have to give divine justice a little push. I checked the terminal clock. 5 hours had passed since the car drove away. The bus to St. Jude's had already left, and I hadn't moved an inch. I had absolutely no intention of getting on that rusty rust bucket to go die among a bunch of strange nuns. It was time. With slow movements, not from weakness but from caution, I unbuttoned the cuff of my left sleeve. Right there, inside my jacket, I had sewn a secret pocket. It was an old habit from my seamstress days, always putting a pocket where no one expects it to keep what's most valuable. My daughters had dug through my main purse. They took my old savings booklet, which was already empty, and my old cell phone, the one with the giant buttons. We're taking this so you don't lose it, Mom. The nuns will let you use the phone. But they didn't know about the other one. From the secret pocket, I pulled out a smartphone, modern, slim, and sleek. I had bought it in secret 6 months ago, asking my neighbor's grandson, a good kid, to teach me how to use it. Miss Eleanor, you learn fast, the boy would tell me. And boy, did I learn. I learned how to use online banking. I learned how to track locations. And above all, I learned how to record conversations. I swiped my finger across the screen. My hands were shaking a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline pumping through my old veins. I didn't dial any of my daughters. I didn't call a neighbor to beg for charity. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name Julian Vance. Julian Vance wasn't just any lawyer. He was the son of my very first millionaire client. I made his first communion suit, his graduation suit, and his wedding tuxedo. He loved me like an aunt. And more importantly, he was the most feared legal shark in the city. He held my real portfolio, not the wet paper my daughters thought they had. He had the original deeds to the house, the power of attorney documents, and control of the investment account I opened 40 years ago and never touched. The one that grew with compound interest, while my daughter spent everything I made in a day. The phone rang twice. Vance speaking. Julian's voice was deep and professional. Julian, it's me, Eleanor, I said. My voice didn't crack. It came out clear and powerful. Miss Eleanor, what a pleasure. I was just about to call you about the signing next week. How are you? Listen to me carefully, Julian. There is no signing next week. The signing is today. Or rather, the action is today. What's wrong? You sound strange. Where are you? His tone flipped from cordial to high alert in a single second. I'm at the North Bus Terminal, bench 18 out on the platform. The terminal? What are you doing there, Miss Eleanor? Are you lost? No, son, I'm not lost. I was dumped. There was a silence on the other end of a line. A thick, heavy silence. Who dumped you? Monica, Valerie, and Susan. They left me here with a plastic suitcase and a ticket to an asylum in St. Jude's. They told me I was in the way. They took my house keys and my old cell phone. They think I'm on my way to the slaughterhouse. I heard the sound of a chair violently scraping backward and papers hitting the floor. Julian had shot up from his desk. "Those damn wretches!" he yelled, completely losing his composure. "Miss Eleanor, do not move. I'm heading there right now. I'm sending a private ambulance just in case, and I'm coming with my driver. No screw that I'm driving myself. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "I don't need an ambulance, Julian. I'm old, not sick. What I need is for you to bring the black folder." "The black folder?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second. "The Queen Mother Protocol. That's the one. And bring the notary. I want to revoke all powers of attorney today before the sun goes down. And I want you to block every single supplementary credit card right now while we're on the phone." "Understood, Miss Eleanor. I am so sorry." "Don't be sorry, Julian. They just made the mistake of their lives. They thought they were abandoning a helpless old woman. They didn't know they were unleashing the beast." I hung up, slipped the phone back into the secret pocket, and calmly buttoned my sleeve. The woman sitting next to me was staring with her mouth wide open, but I didn't say a word. I smoothed the skirt of my gray suit. I brushed an imaginary piece of lint off my shoulder and straightened my spine. The sun was starting to dye the sky orange. It was a dirty, smog-choked sunset, but to me, it looked like the dawn of a new era. Monica had to be arriving at my house right about now. She was probably popping open a bottle of wine, celebrating with her sisters that the problem was finally gone. They were probably measuring the living room to see how to knock down that wall, laughing about how easy it was to fool the old lady. I pictured their faces. I pictured the exact moment they tried to pay for dinner with the card linked to my account, and the machine flashing declined. I pictured the moment the locksmith showed up to change the locks on my house. The house I built, stitch by stitch, brick by brick, while they slept warm and safe. I looked at my hands. They were wrinkled, dotted with age spots, the knuckles slightly deformed by arthritis. But they were strong hands, hands that had wielded heavy shears, that had cut through thick fabrics, that had held an entire family together. I stood up from the bench. I left the blue plastic suitcase sitting right there on the ground. I didn't want it. I didn't want anything that came from them. In the distance, I saw a large, elegant black car approaching, contrasting brutally with the beat-up buses and dirty taxis of the terminal. It was Julian's Mercedes. He was coming in hot, dodging potholes with absolute urgency. People scrambled out of the way. The car slammed to a halt right in front of me, completely ignoring the whistles of the traffic cops. The driver jumped out to open my door, but Julian was faster. He scrambled out of the back seat, immaculate in a navy blue suit, and ran toward me with his arms wide open. "Miss Eleanor." He hugged me tight like he was trying to shield me from the entire world. "I'm fine, boy. I'm fine." I patted his back. "Did you bring what I asked for?" "Everything. The notary is waiting for us at my office, and I have the security team ready to deploy to your house the second you give the word." I nodded. "Let's go then. I have a lot of stitching to undo tonight." I climbed into the car. The air conditioning smelled like clean leather and lavender, completely erasing the stench of diesel and sweat from the terminal. I leaned back into the soft seat. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window and saw the blue suitcase sitting alone and abandoned on the curb, surrounded by trash. That's where the self-sacrificing mother stayed. That's where the old lady who was in the way remained. The woman riding in the black car was no longer her. Now, she was the owner of everything, and she was coming back to collect every single tear with interest. My daughters wanted me to go far away. Well, I had. I had gone to a place they could never, ever reach me. The absolute summit of the power I had built with my own hands. A power they, in their blind greed, had completely forgotten existed. The car accelerated, leaving the terminal behind. I pulled out my phone again and looked at a photo of the three of them when they were little, dressed as angels for a Christmas pageant. I felt a sharp pang in my heart, a quick stabbing pain. But then I remembered Susan's empty eyes and Monica's casual cruelty. I turned off the screen. The show was over. Now the trial was beginning, and the judge, the jury, and the executioner was me. The soft purr of Julian's Mercedes was the only sound in the world, a brutal contrast to the vulgar shouting and stale air of the terminal I had just left behind. I sank into the cream-colored leather seat, closing my eyes for a moment. The air conditioning dried the cold sweat on the back of my neck, but it couldn't dry the rage boiling in my blood. My hands, the same hands that had sewn wedding dresses for the daughters of presidents and haute couture for high society, rested on my knees. They weren't shaking anymore. They were balled into fists as solid as river stones. "Do you want to go straight to the house, Miss Eleanor?" Julian asked, looking at me through the rearview mirror with that mix of respect and deep concern he'd always had for me. "No, son," I replied without opening my eyes. "You don't walk into a house without weapons. Take me to your office. I need to see my papers. I need to see my numbers. I need to remember exactly what I'm worth, because my daughters have made me feel like I'm worth less than a mismatched button." The drive to the financial district was fast. I watched the high-rises blur past the glass reflecting the sunset, and I thought about how funny time really is. 50 years ago, I walked these exact same streets carrying heavy rolls of fabric, wearing worn-out shoes, my stomach half empty, dreaming of giving my little girls a decent life. Now I was crossing the city in a luxury car, the outright owner of buildings my daughters didn't even know existed, preparing to strip them of the decent life they didn't know how to honor. We arrived at Julian's firm. Everything smelled of antique wood wax and raw power. I sat in the main chair right at the head of the boardroom table. Julian didn't argue. He knew who was in charge. In total silence, he placed a thick, heavy black leather folder in front of me. On the cover, embossed in gold, were just 2 letters. L.M. Eleanor Mendez. My name. Not somebody's widow, not somebody's mother. My name. "Everything is here, Miss Eleanor," Julian said, pouring me a cup of chamomile tea into bone china. "The inventory updated as of this morning. The investment accounts, the property titles for the downtown commercial real estate, the shares in the textile company, and of course the trust." I opened the folder. The smell of legal paper filled my lungs. I ran my fingers over the pages. Right there was the truth that Monica, Valerie, and Susan were completely ignorant of. They thought we lived off Albert's pension and whatever little pennies I kept stuffed under the mattress. They never understood that a seamstress hears everything and says nothing. When the bankers' wives came in for their fittings, they talked about investments. When the lawyers brought their suits in for tailoring, they talked about the law. And I, while adjusting hems and taking in waistlines, learned. I learned to buy land when nobody else wanted it. I learned to buy dollars when the local currency tanked. My daughters looked at me and saw a needle in my hand. I saw a magic wand that turned fabric into gold. "The primary operating account," I said, pointing with an index finger calloused by decades of pushing a needle. "How much is available for immediate withdrawal?" "Enough to buy the entire bus terminal if you wanted to," Julian replied with a half smile. "But I'm assuming you don't want to buy buses." "No," I said flatly. "I want to buy my freedom and finance my justice. Julian, bring me the safe, the small one." Julian nodded and walked over to a painting on the wall that hid the wall safe. He came back with a gray metal lockbox. I punched in the combination the date I opened my first tailoring shop. The lid popped open with a satisfying click. There was no jewelry inside. My official jewelry, those cheap gold trinkets and cultured pearls, had already been stolen by my daughters piece by piece. What sat inside the box was my real war chest, my Mont Blanc fountain pen, the one I used to sign my very first deed, a set of heavy brass master keys that opened every single door in my house, even the ones they had changed, and a red leather notebook. I picked up the notebook. Inside, written in my meticulous cursive, was a record of every single loan I had ever given them that they had conveniently forgotten to pay back. Monica's wedding, Valerie's car, Susan's master's degree that she never finished. Sum after sum. "They think I'm a useless old woman," I murmured, turning the pages. "They think old age is some kind of fog that wipes your brain clean." I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the illuminated city. "You know what the worst part of being old is, Julian?" I asked, staring down at the headlights of the cars looking as small as ants. "Tell me, Miss Eleanor." "The invisibility. You become transparent. You walk into a room and nobody looks at you unless they need you to watch the kids or loan them money. They talk right in front of you like you're a piece of furniture. Monica used to talk to her lover on the phone while I was sitting 6 feet away knitting. Valerie would discuss her tax fraud at the dining room table while I ate my soup. They think just because my ears are old, they're closed. They think just because my eyes water, they're blind. I spun around to face him. That invisibility was my greatest weapon. It let me see exactly who they really were. And today, Julian, the spell breaks. Today, the invisible grandmother is making her presence known. I walked back to the table and picked up the fountain pen. The weight of it in my hand gave me absolute certainty. Let's begin, I ordered. Step 1. Cut the supply lines. I want you to block every supplementary credit card linked to my accounts. All of them. Monica's card for her beauty salons, Valerie's for her business expenses, and Susan's for her trips. Done, Julian said, his fingers flying furiously across his laptop keyboard. They are being declined as we speak. If they try to buy a pack of gum, the machine is going to tell them insufficient funds. I felt a dark, ice-cold satisfaction. I pictured Monica right at that very moment. They had almost certainly ordered expensive food to celebrate my departure. Sushi, maybe, or Italian, from that pretentious place they love so much. I pictured the delivery guy standing at the door and Monica swiping the card over and over again, her face turning red with embarrassment and rage. Step 2, the revocation. I continued, my voice gaining strength with every syllable. The power of attorney I signed over to them 3 years ago, back when I got dizzy and they got scared, or rather got excited thinking I was going to die. That power of attorney that lets them manage the house. I want it revoked, right now. The notary is waiting in the conference room next door with the protocol ready to go, Julian assured me. All it needs is your signature. And step 3, I said, pausing. This was the most painful part, but also the most necessary. The will. Julian stopped typing and looked right at me. We're changing it, Miss Eleanor. We're not just changing it, we're destroying it, and we're writing a new one. In the old one, I left them the house in equal parts and the money split for their children. But their children, my grandkids. My voice cracked for a fraction of a second, but I pulled it together. My grandkids don't even say hello to me. They learned well from their mothers. There's Grandma, she smells like mothballs, Valerie's oldest boy said last week. They all laughed. I pressed my lips together. Draft a new one. The house, the money, the commercial properties. Everything goes to a charitable foundation for abandoned senior citizens. I want the name of the foundation to be The Ones Who Are in the Way. And to my daughters, I leave the absolute legal minimum required by law, if there's anything left, and a letter. That is all. That is a harsh decision, Miss Eleanor. Harsh was the metal bench at the bus terminal, Julian. Harsh was the sun beating down on my face for 5 hours. Harsh is the loneliness you feel when you are surrounded by your own family. This is just justice. A straight stitch to close an open wound. The notary walked in right at that moment. He was a short, bald man who looked half asleep, but he woke up instantly when he saw the look on my face. I read the documents with the exact precision of a tailor checking a pattern. Not a single comma escaped me. I signed every page with my Mont Blanc pen, watching the black ink dry, sealing the fate of my 3 little girls. With every signature, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. The blue plastic suitcase I left at the terminal contained the victim. The woman signing these papers was the survivor. Done, the notary said, stamping his seal with a sharp thud that echoed like a gunshot. As of this exact second, your daughters have 0 legal authority over anything. Not your accounts, not your property, not your person. I looked at the wall clock. It was 8 p.m. Good, I said, capping the pen. Now comes the physical part. Julian, do you have a contact at that private security firm? The guys who look like walking refrigerators? Yes, Miss Eleanor. Titan Security. Ex-military. Highly discreet, highly effective. Hire them. I want 3 guards at the door of my house tonight. I don't want them to go inside. Not yet. I want them outside where they can be seen. I want my daughters to get a little scared when they look out the window and see men in uniform watching the house. And I want you to drive me home. Julian looked alarmed. Miss Eleanor, that's risky. There could be yelling violence. I am not going in there to get into a screaming match like some street vendor, Julian. I have class. I am going to walk into my house through the front door. I'm going to sleep in my own bed. And if they say a single word out of line, you will show them the revocation of power, and the guards will show them the door." I stood up and smoothed my gray suit. I caught my reflection in the window glass. Despite the exhaustion, my eyes were shining with an intensity I hadn't seen in years. I fixed my white hair, making sure the bobby pins in my bun were secure. "You know what, Julian?" I said as he gathered the black folder. "My entire life, I sewed so that other people could shine. I sewed so my daughters would look beautiful at their parties, so they would look successful at their jobs. I was always the thread holding the pieces together, hidden on the inside, invisible, so the garment looked perfect. But the thread is the only thing stopping everything from falling apart." I walked toward the office door with a firm step. "Tonight, I'm going to show them what happens when you pull the wrong thread. The whole dress unravels, and you're left standing naked in the middle of the street." Julian opened the door for me and smiled with pure admiration. "After you, Queen Mother." We went down to the parking garage. Night had completely fallen over the city, but I had never seen the path forward so clearly. I had the resources, I had the law, I had the willpower, and I had something they never expected: the master keys to my own life, jingling in my pocket like war bells. I got into the car. This time, I didn't close my eyes. I looked straight ahead at the road that would take us back to my house, my occupied territory. The engine roared and we pulled out into the dark. The fear had stayed at the terminal, along with the bottle of warm water. Now all that was left was the execution of a perfect plan, tailored exactly to the measurements of their betrayal. The Mercedes engine cut off with a barely perceptible whisper, as if the car itself understood that our arrival required absolute stealth. We were parked half a block from my house, hidden in the shadows of a massive oak tree I had planted 40 years ago, back when my hands didn't have age spots, and my husband Albert was still alive to water the yard on Sundays. Looking through the tinted window, my house looked like a party boat stranded in a dark ocean. Every single light was blazing, all of them. From the foyer to the kitchen, all the way up to the second-floor bedrooms. They had even turned on the backyard lanterns, the ones I was always so careful not to use to keep the electric bill down. I could hear music. It wasn't classical music or old ballads. It was that modern, repetitive, vulgar noise my grandkids listened to. "Looks like the party started early, Miss Eleanor," Julian muttered, watching the scene with a deep frown. His fingers were drumming rhythmically on the leather folder resting on his lap. "They're celebrating my funeral without a body," I replied. I could feel the cold from the leather seat seeping into my bones, but it didn't freeze me, it hardened me. "They think the house is theirs. They think the air they're breathing inside no longer smells like me." I saw movement on the corner. A black SUV identical to the ones politicians or cartel bosses use glided silently up the street and blocked my driveway. 4 men stepped out. These weren't your average mall cops. They were mountains of muscle poured into black tactical gear, wearing earpieces and sporting looks that could cut glass. The Titan security team. Julian wasn't joking when he said they were effective. They moved like shadows. 2 taking position at the main gate, 2 flanking the perimeter of the yard. "They're in position," Julian confirmed, checking his phone. "Ready to make the cut, Miss Eleanor." I traced the brass keys in my pocket. I felt the cold metal against my sweating palm. Those keys opened the solid oak front door I had custom carved in the Carolinas. Those keys were the ultimate proof that I was not a guest in my own life. "Let's go," I said. "I want to see their faces before they even know I'm there. I want to be the needle that sticks in their shoe when they least expect it." We got out of the car. The night air was cool, smelling of jasmine and betrayal. We walked slowly. Julian offered me his arm, but I gently waved it away. I needed to walk this path on my own. My orthopedic shoes struck the pavement in a steady rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of justice approaching. When we reached the wrought iron gate, one of the Titan guards gave a short nod and stepped aside without a word. There was no need for doorbells or announcements. I glided up the flagstone walkway toward the front door. From inside, the voices carried perfectly amplified by the euphoria of alcohol and a cheap victory. Finally, oh my God. It was Monica's voice, my firstborn, It sounded thick, slurred. I thought she was never going to leave. Did you see the look on her face when we gave her that blue suitcase? She looked like a wet puppy. There was laughter, cruel laughter, the kind that scrapes against your soul. "Oh, Monica, don't be like that," Susan chimed in, the good one with her hypocritical tone. I felt a little bad, but honestly, it was for the best. She'll be peaceful up in St. Jude's just praying. She was just in the way here. Besides, I needed her room for my yoga studio. "And what are we going to do with all those old clothes?" Valerie asked, always the practical one, always calculating. "Those outdated tailored suits smell like mothballs." "Into the trash," Monica declared. "Tomorrow we hire a truck and have them haul it all away. Furniture, clothes, paintings, anything that smells like Mom goes. I want the house spotless by the weekend." I invited the PTA board over. I stopped right in front of the oak door. My hand trembled, but not out of fear. It was pure, distilled wrath. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to unstitch me from the history of this family like a loose thread on a botched hem. I pulled out the master key. I slid it into the lock, smoothly turning it millimeter by millimeter so the tumblers wouldn't make a sound. The well-oiled mechanism, I oiled it myself every 6 months, gave way without a single complaint. I pushed the door open just a crack, just enough to see and hear without being seen. They were in the living room. They had pushed my Louis XV chairs against the wall to make space. In the center, sitting on my imported glass coffee table, were bottles from my personal wine cellar. Reserve red wines that Albert used to save for special occasions. Champagne that I had been saving for their weddings that had already come and gone and ultimately failed. They were chugging down my history in giant gulps. All 3 of them were standing around, barefoot, their hair a mess, wine glasses in hand. My grandkids weren't there. They had probably shoved them into their bedrooms with iPads so they wouldn't interrupt the strategic planning session. Right then, the service bell rang, a sharp, jarring sound that cut through the laughter. "That must be the sushi," Valerie said, stretching lazily. "I ordered the premium combo from that Japanese place over in the Golden Zone, $280 of raw fish to celebrate our freedom." Valerie walked toward the entryway, passing within 6 feet of where I stood, hidden in the shadows of the foyer behind a massive fern. She yanked the front door open, completely oblivious to the fact that it was already unlocked. A young delivery guy in a motorcycle helmet, looking thoroughly annoyed, was holding 3 huge brown paper bags stamped with elegant logos. "Evening. Order for Valerie Mendez? That'll be $280. Yeah, put it on this," Valerie said with absolute arrogance, holding out a gold card. My supplementary card. The one I gave her for emergencies with the kids, which she treated like her personal piggy bank. The kids slid the card into the portable terminal. There was a 3-second silence, then a sharp, obnoxious beep. "Beep." "Declined, ma'am," the kid said, staring at the screen. "What? Impossible." Valerie let out a nervous little laugh. "That card has no limit. It's my mother's, but I handle the accounts. Run it again. Your little machine probably just lost signal." The kid sighed, rolled his eyes, and tried it again. "Beep. Insufficient funds, or the card has been blocked by the issuer," the kid read aloud. "Do you have another way to pay?" From the living room, Monica yelled, "Valerie, what's the holdup with the food? I'm starving." "Hold on, this piece of junk isn't working," Valerie yelled back. She dug into her back pocket and pulled out another card. Monica's platinum card also linked to my primary account. "Here, try this one." The delivery guy, visibly losing patience, ran the second card. The result was identical. The sound of the rejection echoed in the dead silence of the foyer, like a judge's gavel. "Lady, they're all declining. If you don't have cash, I have to take the order back. I've got other deliveries." Valerie flushed red with fury. "You are not taking anything back. I am Valerie Mendez. This is a bank error. Monica, get out here." Monica and Susan walked over, wine glasses in hand, stumbling just a little. "What's going on? Why all the yelling?" "The cards aren't going through. It says they're blocked." "What do you mean, blocked?" Monica frowned, her face twisting in disbelief. "Mom never checks the statements until the end of the month. The bank probably just flagged the big charge and locked it down. Here, try Susan's." Susan handed over her plastic. Third attempt, Third failure. The delivery guy started zipping up the thermal bag. "Sorry, ladies. No pay, no food." "Wait!" Monica shrieked, and for the very first time, I heard genuine panic in her voice. "I'll call the bank. I'm an authorized user." Monica whipped out her cell phone, dialed the number, and put it on speakerphone, while the delivery guy stood there tapping his foot against the floor. "Good evening, Central Bank. You have reached our automated system." The robotic voice filled the space. "To report a lost or stolen card, press 1. Your card ending in 8432 has been reported stolen and deactivated by the primary account holder at 1800 hours." The three of them froze solid. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the distance and my own calm, steady breathing. "Reported stolen," Susan whispered. "But I have the card right here. Who reported it?" "Mom is on a bus heading into the middle of nowhere," Monica said. "Mom doesn't even know how to use the banking app." "Somebody must have hacked us," Valerie said, her face turning pale. "Or that lawyer, Vance. I bet he found out and he's trying to screw us over." That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the fern. I didn't make a sound. I simply took 3 steps forward into the light of the foyer chandelier. Julian appeared right beside me like the grim reaper of legality, clutching the black folder tight against his chest. "It wasn't a hacker, Valerie," I said. My voice came out soft, but loaded with authority, exactly like when I used to correct a botched seam on a silk gown. "And Julian isn't screwing anybody over. He is simply following my instructions." All 3 of their heads snapped toward me at the exact same time, synchronized with an almost comical precision, like vultures interrupted in the middle of a carcass feast. Their jaws hit the floor. The wine glass slipped right out of Susan's hand and shattered against the marble floor, spilling red wine everywhere like blood. "Mom," Monica stammered. Her eyes were bulging out of her skull, bloodshot from the alcohol and the sheer shock. What are you doing here? We left you at the terminal. The bus left at 5. "I missed the bus," I said, my voice dripping with irony, taking a slow step toward them. "Or rather, I decided to change my destination. Turns out, St. Jude's didn't appeal to me nearly as much as getting my house back." "Are you out of your mind?" Valerie screamed, recovering from the initial shock and immediately going on the offensive just like she always did. "Look at you. You're delirious. How did you get here? Who brought you? You probably wandered off and bothered this poor man." She pointed at Julian with absolute disgust. "Mr. Vance, my mother suffers from senile dementia. I don't know what she told you, but you need to take her to the asylum immediately. It's for her own good." Julian didn't even blink. He adjusted his glasses and looked at me, waiting for the order. I didn't look at Julian. I looked right at the sushi delivery kid who was watching the scene unfold like it was live reality TV. "Young man," I said, pulling a crisp $50 bill from my purse, money I always kept tucked away in a secret compartment. "Take this for your trouble, and take the food with you. There is nothing being celebrated in this house tonight, and my daughter's credit has just been permanently cut off." The kid snatched the bill, muttered a quick, "Thanks, ma'am," and bolted out the door, slamming it shut behind him. The sound of the door slamming locked us inside a suffocating bubble of tension. Cut off. Monica took a step forward, trying to use her height to intimidate me. It was a tactic that worked perfectly when I was sitting in my wheelchair, but now, standing up, with adrenaline flooding my veins, it was entirely useless. "Mom, stop spouting nonsense. You're exhausted. Let's get you to your room. Well, your ex-room. We'll make you some tea, and tomorrow we'll take you right back to the terminal. You cannot be here. The kids get scared when you cough." "Nobody is going anywhere, Monica," Julian interrupted, taking a firm step forward and cracking open the black folder. "And I strongly suggest you lower your voice. You are speaking to the absolute legal owner of this property, and of every single asset you have been recklessly squandering." "Who the hell asked you, you ambulance chaser?" Valerie spat. "We have power of attorney. Mom signed everything over to us 3 years ago. She doesn't decide anything. We manage the estate. She is mentally incompetent." Julian pulled out a document bearing a fresh notary seal, the ink still smelling of office air and law. "Notarized document 8945, signed and sealed exactly 1 hour ago before public notary number 5. Julian read, his voice deadpan but utterly lethal. total and irrevocable revocation of all powers, mandates, and representations previously granted in favor of Monica Valerie and Susan Mendez. He looked up over the rim of his glasses. In layman's terms, that piece of paper you have locked in the safe isn't even fit to wrap fish in anymore. As of 7:30 p.m. tonight, none of you possess any legal authority over Eleanor Mendez or her assets, and any further attempt to use her credit cards or bank accounts will be prosecuted as fraud and grand theft. Susan collapsed onto the sofa as pale as a ghost. No, it can't be. Mom, you wouldn't do this to us. We're your daughters. I walked past them straight into the living room. My footsteps echoed in the stunned silence of the three women. I walked right up to my favorite chair, the green velvet one they wanted to throw in the garbage. I ran my hand along the backrest, reclaiming my territory. I sat down slowly. I sat with the majesty of a queen returning to her throne after a brutal war. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at them. I really looked at them, not with the eyes of a mother, but with the eyes of an expert seamstress inspecting a piece of fabric for flaws. And I saw plenty. I saw envy, I saw greed, I saw sheer terror. But I didn't see love, not a single stitch of it. You left me sitting on a metal bench baking in the sun, I said softly. I didn't yell, there was no need to. You handed me a plastic suitcase stuffed with old rags. You told me I was in the way. You'll have a better place there, you'll have a better place there, you said. Your own good, Monica interrupted, her voice edging on hysteria. You're lonely here. You need professional care. Quiet. My voice cracked like a whip slicing through the air. Monica's mouth slammed shut instantly. Do not ever interrupt me in my own house again. I took a deep breath. You thought I was an old rag. You thought my silence meant I was stupid. But you completely forgot who taught you how to walk, who taught you how to eat. And more importantly, you forgot who paid for every single designer dress you're wearing right now. You forgot that everything you see around you from the ceiling down to the floorboards came from my hands, from my needles, from my tired eyes. Valerie, always the most aggressive, tried one last desperate play. She lunged at me. "Give me that phone," she screamed, trying to snatch the cell phone sticking out of my pocket. "That sleazy lawyer brainwashed you. I'm calling the cops. I'm telling them you've been kidnapped." Before she could get within 2 feet of me, the front door swung open, and 2 of the Titan guards stepped inside. They were massive. Just their physical presence filled the room with an undeniable, crushing threat. Valerie slammed on the brakes, hitting an invisible wall of pure terror. "Everything all right, Miss Eleanor?" the head of security asked, his voice a deep rumble. "Everything is perfectly under control, Commander," I replied without moving an inch. My daughter Valerie was just a little upset, but she's calmed down now. Isn't that right, sweetie? Valerie backed away, trembling, staring wide-eyed at the armed men, and then back at me. "You brought thugs into the house? Into our house?" "Into my house," I corrected her. "And they aren't thugs. They're my new home security system. Because it turns out we have thieves in this neighborhood. Thieves who infiltrate the family, who steal jewelry out of dresser drawers, who forge signatures, and who abandon old women at bus terminals." I stood up from the armchair. The pure energy of the confrontation was keeping me on my feet, acting better than any medication ever could. Julian explained their new living arrangements to them. Julian nodded and pulled out another document. "Ladies, this property belongs exclusively to Miss Eleanor. Given that you are all legal adults and you hold no formal lease agreement, your presence here is legally classified as trespassing should the owner decide to press charges. However, Miss Eleanor is feeling generous." The 3 of them held their breath, waiting for a pardon. "She is allowing you to stay tonight," Julian continued, "because it is late and she doesn't want to throw you out into the street at this hour, something you didn't hesitate to do to her. But there are conditions." "What conditions?" Susan asked, already whimpering. "First, you will hand over every single key to this house, right now. All of them, including the copies you gave to the maids and your husbands. Second, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., an auditing team will be here to inventory every single valuable item in this house. If so much as a silver spoon is missing, criminal charges will be filed immediately. Third, you will sleep in the guest bedrooms downstairs. The upstairs bedrooms, your former bedrooms, have been locked down for security purposes. Monica let out a sharp, unhinged laugh. Are you joking? You want us to sleep in the guest rooms? There's no air conditioning in there. My kids can't sleep in there. Your kids can sleep in the bed with you, Monica. Or you can all go check into a hotel. Oh, wait. Your credit cards don't work. I walked right up to Monica until we were face to face. I could smell the expensive wine on her breath. You took my bed from me. You were going to ship me off to sleep on a cot in a convent, and you're complaining about the guest room? You should be getting down on your knees and thanking me. I'm not making you sleep in the yard with the dogs, though frankly, the dogs have shown me a hell of a lot more loyalty than you ever did. I held out my hand, palm up, demanding the keys. There was a brief moment of resistance. Monica clenched her fists. Valerie stared at the guards, calculating her odds. Susan just stood there, crying. But the reality of the situation, heavy and brutal as a cast-iron, finally dropped on them. They had no money. They had no legal power, and they had two ex-military contractors staring holes through them. Slowly, painfully, Monica pulled out her designer keychain. She dropped it into my hand. Then Valerie. Then Susan. The weight of those keys in my hand felt like the weight of victory, but it was a profoundly sad victory. I didn't feel happy. I just felt the crushing emptiness of confirming that my worst suspicions were entirely true. I had raised parasites, not daughters. Good, I said, slipping the keys into my pocket next to mine. Now get out of my sight. Go to the downstairs rooms and keep quiet. I want absolute silence. If I hear a single shout, a single complaint, or if I see you trying to sneak anything of value out of here, the security team has strict orders to throw you out into the street. And trust me, they won't be nearly as gentle about it as I am. The three women who just hours ago believed they ruled the world retreated with their heads hung low, dragging their feet down the hallway. They looked like scolded little girls, but entirely stripped of the innocence of childhood. They were grown women utterly defeated by their own blinding greed. When they finally disappeared down the hall, I collapsed back into the armchair. The sheer exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. My 78 years caught up with me in a single second. Julian walked over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You handled that perfectly, Miss Eleanor. It was flawless. It was horrible, Julian, I whispered, closing my eyes. Having to treat your own daughters like enemy combatants is the saddest thing a mother can ever do. But it had to be done. The fabric was rotting away. I had to cut away the dead weight. Do you want the guards to stay inside? Yes. One at the end of their hallway, another by the front door. I don't trust them. Desperation makes people do crazy things. And Julian, thank you. Thank you for bringing me the thread when I had run out. Always, Queen Mother. I was left alone in the living room. The lights were still blazing, illuminating the absolute disaster of shattered glass and open wine bottles. I looked at my hands again. They were old, they were wrinkled, but they still held immense strength. I had won tonight's battle. I had taken back my castle, but I knew the war was far from over. Tomorrow, when the sun came up and their hangovers faded, they would try to counterattack. They would try to manipulate the grandkids. They would call other lawyers. They would look for cracks in my armor. It didn't matter. I had my thimble on and my needle was threaded. I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the yard. My reflection stared back at me. A small, white-haired old woman. But right behind that fragile image, I saw the shadow of who I truly was. I wasn't some old lady who was in the way. I was the master tailor of my own destiny, and I had just begun to stitch together the most complicated garment of my entire life. My own dignity. I flipped off the living room lights, plunging them into the darkness of their borrowed rooms, while I climbed the stairs to my master bedroom, the room they never should have tried to take from me. Every single step I climbed was a reaffirmation. I am the one in charge here. I woke up with the first ray of sunlight hitting my face, but this time it wasn't the scorching, filthy sun of the bus terminal. It was clean light, filtering softly through the raw silk curtains of my bedroom. I stretched slowly, feeling my old bones pop and crack, not with pain, but with settling. It was the exact feeling of a garment finally falling perfectly into place after a dozen alterations. I got out of bed and slipped into my satin robe. As I passed the full-length mirror, I draped my yellow measuring tape around my neck, my old companion. The numbers nearly rubbed off from decades of use. Today, I wasn't going to measure fabric. Today, I was going to measure shame. I walked down the stairs calmly. The house was dead silent, a stark contrast to the obnoxious blast of cheap music from the night before. In the kitchen, I found exactly the scene I was expecting. Monica, Valerie, and Susan were sitting around the breakfast table. Their faces were washed, they had deep bags under their eyes, and they were clutching mugs of instant coffee. They hadn't dared to use the espresso machine. They knew they didn't have permission. The moment they saw me walk in, they stiffened. Monica, who had always been the most arrogant, tried to force a smile, but it came out looking like a botched, puckered seam. "Good morning, Mom," she said, trying to make her voice sound sweet, but it came out sounding like crushed glass. "Did you sleep well? We were really worried about you." "Save the theater, Monica." I cut her off, pulling my own fine china cup from the cabinet and pouring myself the fresh ground coffee that Martha, the housekeeper, who had returned this morning after my phone call, had just brewed. Instant coffee is for uninvited guests, and right now you three are very much uninvited. Valerie slammed her hand on the table, though there wasn't much force behind it. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You've punished us. You took the keys. The kids are terrified of those armed gorillas standing in the yard. We need to sit down and talk like civilized adults. Give us back access to the accounts, and let's just forget this whole bus terminal madness. It was just a misunderstanding." I turned around slowly, the steaming cup in my hand. "A misunderstanding. You dumped me with a $5 bill and a plastic suitcase. That is not a misunderstanding, Valerie. That is a crime. And speaking of crimes, the doorbell rang exactly at 8 a.m. "Get the door," I ordered. "It's the company I promised you." Susan dragged her feet to the foyer and opened the door. Julian walked in looking as immaculate as ever, followed by 3 people my daughters had never seen before. 2 men carrying briefcases, and a woman with a no-nonsense expression holding a tablet. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor," Julian said with a slight bow. "The auditing team is ready to begin." "An audit?" Monica shrieked, jumping out of her chair. "You're going to audit us like we're common thieves? We are your daughters." "You are my daughters, yes," I admitted, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "But you are also the people who have been quietly smuggling things out of this house, piece by piece, for years." "Proceed." The woman with the tablet immediately started walking through the living room, pointing out empty spaces in the display cabinets, faded squares on the wallpaper where paintings used to hang, and glaring gaps in the silver drawers. My daughters stood frozen in horror as the auditors started calling out the missing inventory. "Missing 19th century silver tea service," the auditor announced. "Missing Southwestern landscape oil painting. Missing 3 fur coats from the winter collection. Missing certificates of authenticity for the commemorative gold coin collection." Every single item called out was a slap to the face. Monica turned beet red. Valerie stared at the floor. Susan just started crying silently. I took the tea set," Susan stammered. "But it was just to polish it, Mom. I swear, it was getting tarnished." "That's a lie," I said calmly. "You sold it 3 months ago to a pawn shop downtown. I have the recovery receipt. Julian bought it back last week." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I had stripped them totally naked without removing a single piece of their clothing. "Sit down," I ordered, pointing to the chairs in the formal dining room. They obeyed. The auditors kept working in the background, a constant hum of noise, reminding them that a new betrayal was being uncovered every 60 seconds. I took my seat at the head of the table. Julian stood to my right, pulling documents out of his inseparable black folder. "Do you honestly believe my money comes from your father's life insurance and whatever pennies I saved up hemming pants?" I began smoothing out an imaginary wrinkle on the tablecloth. "You always look down on me. Just a little seamstress," you'd tell your rich friends with that sneer in your voice. "My mom just sews to keep herself busy," Monica scoffed. "Mom, please. We know Dad left a decent policy, but it's not like you're a Rockefeller. I don't know where you're getting the cash to pay for these fancy lawyers and security guards, but you're going to blow through whatever's left." I smiled. It was a cold smile, the exact same smile I learned to use whenever a client tried to lowball me on a dress that took months to make. Julian, show them the pattern. Julian slid 3 thick binders across the mahogany table, one in front of each of them. Open them. They did so reluctantly. The second Valerie looked at the first page, her eyes went so wide I thought they were going to pop out of her skull. This can't be real, Valerie stammered. Northern Textiles, Inc., the factory that supplies uniforms to all the state schools. The one that exports denim to the U.S. That's the one, I said. I founded it 30 years ago, right around the time you girls were in middle school, obsessing over your Sweet 16 parties. I started with 2 industrial sewing machines in a rented garage. Today, it's 3 manufacturing warehouses and 500 employees. Monica was flipping through the pages frantically. But it says right here the majority shareholder is some LLC called LM Investments. Eleanor Mendez, Julian clarified. Your mother doesn't just own the house you sleep in. She owns the company that manufactures the clothing you sell in your boutique, Monica. Monica dropped the folder like it was on fire. What? No, I buy from exclusive suppliers in the city. Suppliers that are my subsidiaries. I explained, savoring every single syllable. I've been subsidizing your little business since day one, sweetie. Those imported Italian fabrics you sell at a markup, they roll right off my looms in the industrial park. And the storefront for your boutique? Who do you think owns that building? Monica went ghost white. You pay rent to Horizon Real Estate. Julian delivered the killing blow, which is 100% wholly owned by Miss Eleanor. I turned my gaze to Valerie. And you, the financial genius, that massive loan that saved you from bankruptcy 2 years ago when you got tangled up in that idiotic pyramid scheme, who do you think bought up your bad debt to keep you from going to federal prison for fraud? Valerie started to shake. It was an anonymous investment group. It was me, I said, tapping my index finger on the table. I pulled a silver thimble out of my pocket and slipped it onto my finger to emphasize the clack against the wood. I bought your freedom, Valerie, and you paid me back by dumping me in a bus terminal to rot. Susan, the youngest, looked back and forth between her sisters and me in absolute sheer terror. Mom, what about me? I don't have any businesses. I just stay home and take care of my kids. You live off the allowance I deposit into your account religiously every month, I said softly. An allowance that comes directly from my stock dividends. Stocks that, by the way, are entirely in my name, not your dead father's like you always assumed. I stood up. The yellow measuring tape swayed against my chest. For years, I played the part of the clueless old lady who didn't understand numbers, just to see if a single one of you had the basic decency to be honest. Poor Mom, she doesn't even know how to use an ATM, you'd say. And I, the woman who authorizes international wire transfers from a burner phone, just let you talk. I wanted to see exactly how deep your greed went. And yesterday, I reached the end of the tape. You've run out of slack. Monica, with tears of absolute rage and humiliation in her eyes, tried one final desperate attack. Fine, keep your damn money. Let's go, girls. We don't need her charity. We're taking the kids, and you are never going to see them again. Let's see who takes care of you when you actually get sick. I was waiting for that threat. It was the dirtiest card she had, using my grandkids as leverage. Sit down, Monica, I said, my voice booming like thunder. I am not finished. Julian pulled out 3 more envelopes. As Miss Eleanor's legal representative, I am formally notifying you that the education for all of your children, her grandchildren, has been paid in full in advance, directly to the institutions through the university level. The trusts are ironclad. You cannot touch a single cent of it. However, should you attempt to keep the children away from their grandmother, there is an emotional well-being clause that allows me to immediately sever the funding to their elite private schools. Do you want to pay those tuitions yourselves with your blocked credit cards and your bankrupt businesses? By all means, take them. The 3 of them sat there completely mute. They had lost their queen, their bishops, and their pawns. It was absolute checkmate. What do you want us to do? Valerie asked, her voice cracking utterly and totally broken. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the paralyzing fear of the financial abyss opening up beneath her feet. I walked slowly around the table, placing a hand on each of their shoulders, not with affection, but with heavy, undeniable weight. "I want you to work," I said. "The life of the idle socialite is over. Done. Work." Monica looked at me like I had just suggested she fly to the moon. "Yes, you, Monica, are going to run your boutique. But for real this time. The subsidized rent is over. You are going to pay me fair market value, and if you can't make the math work, you shut it down and go flip burgers for all I care. Horizon Real Estate does not forgive late rent." I stopped behind Valerie. "You, Valerie, are going to pay me back every single penny of the debt I absorbed. Julian has drafted a strict payment plan. You're going to have to sell your brand new SUV, and you're probably going to have to move into a much smaller apartment. You are going to learn what it actually costs to put food on the table." Finally, I reached Susan. "And you, my sweet girl, you are going to learn how to actually take care of people. Not your own kids, you have nannies for that. I mean the people who are in the way. You are going to volunteer at the St. Jude's Assisted Living Facility. Yes, the exact same one you tried to ship me off to. You are going to go 3 days a week. You are going to wash soiled bed sheets, and you are going to spoon-feed old folks who have absolutely no one left to defend them. I want a signed report from the Mother Superior every single Friday. If she doesn't sign off, you don't get your grocery check." I walked back to the head of the table and sat down, folding my hands in my lap. "Those are my terms. If you don't like them, the front door is wide open. You can walk out right now. But you leave with exactly what you are wearing. Nothing else. No cars, no credit cards, no jewelry." I stared at them. I could practically see the gears in their heads grinding, desperately searching for a loophole, a trap door, anything. But there was nothing. Julian had woven an impenetrable legal net, and I, their mother, had tied a double knot around my heart. "And if we agree," Susan asked in a whisper, "can we stay in the house?" "You can stay in the guest bedrooms," I corrected her, "until you prove you can pay for your own roof, or until I decide I don't want you here anymore. And you will pay rent. It will be symbolic, but it will be rent. Just so you finally understand that in this life, a roof is earned." Monica hung her head. Tears dripped down onto the folder of the textile empire she never knew I owned. "Mom, why didn't you just tell us before? Why did you let it get to this point?" "I didn't let you get to anything," I answered firmly. "You walked yourselves right up to the edge of the cliff. I just removed the safety net when you tried to push me over." I stood up, officially adjourning the meeting. "Julian, have them sign the non-disclosure agreements and the promissory notes. If a single one of them speaks ill of me in their little social circles, the penalty clause activates immediately. I want them to remain my loving daughters in the eyes of society, but inside these walls, they will know they are my debtors." I walked toward the dining room exit. Just before crossing the threshold, I stopped and turned around one last time. "Oh, and one more thing. That load-bearing wall you wanted to knock down to expand the living room?" I pointed at the wall dividing the dining room from the lounge. "That wall stays, not because it's structural, because I like it. And from this day forward, the only things getting knocked down in this house are your illusions of living for free." I walked out into the garden. The sun was high now, shining brightly over the rose bushes I had grafted myself. I took a deep breath of the morning air. It smelled of wet earth and victory. But it wasn't a sweet, sugary victory. It was a victory that tasted like iron, hard, and absolutely necessary. In the distance, I could hear Monica crying, a loud, desperate wail. I didn't feel pity. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually raising them. It was late, incredibly late, but I was finally doing my job as a mother, teaching them that actions have consequences, and that the woman who gave them life and built their entire world demands respect. I pulled my secret cell phone out of my pocket. I had a text from the bank. "Security transfers complete. Assets secured." I put the phone away and gently brushed the petals of a rose bush. A thorn pricked my finger, drawing a tiny drop of blood. I wiped it away without flinching. A little blood is the price of any stitch worth making. They had wanted to throw me away like a useless scrap of fabric, but they had just found out that I owned the entire bolt of cloth, all the needles, and most importantly, the scissors that could cut the supply line to their ingratitude. 6 months have passed since that afternoon at the bus terminal. 6 months since the sun burned my skin and betrayal burned my soul. Today, the sun pours through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my living room, but it doesn't burn anymore. It illuminates. It illuminates a house that for the first time in decades runs like a Swiss watch instead of a 3-ring circus. I am sitting in my green velvet armchair, the one they wanted to throw in the trash. Resting on my lap isn't the heavy blanket of a freezing old woman, but the master accounting ledger for Northern Textiles. Beside me, Julian Vance is sipping his coffee with a highly satisfied smile. We don't need to talk much. The silence in this house has changed its texture. It used to be a silence of pure indifference toward me. Now, it is a silence built on respect. The kind of respect you earn when you prove you have a steady hand and razor-sharp scissors. It is 2 p.m. on a Sunday, the hour of the weekly reckoning. The dining room door opens and Monica walks in. She no longer glides into the room like she's floating on a cloud of superiority. She walks with the heavy, grounded step of someone who has been on her feet for 8 hours a day, dealing with nightmare customers. Her hands, which used to be weighed down by acrylic nails that made it impossible to pick up a dime, are now cut short, scrubbed clean, and sporting a couple of Band-Aids. "Good afternoon, Mom," she says. And she says it looking me dead in the eye, not staring down at a phone screen. "Good afternoon, Monica. How was the week at the boutique?" "Brutal," she admits, sitting down carefully. "The new fall collection got delayed. I had to go down to the warehouse myself and sort through the inventory because I couldn't afford to pay the staff overtime." "And did you learn anything?" I ask, not looking up from my numbers. "That boxes are heavy," she sighs, "and that you can feel cheap fabric the second you touch it. You were right, Mom. People pay for quality, not just the label. Our sales are actually up 15% since I stopped buying imported garbage and started strictly using the textiles from your factory." I give a slight nod. It is the first time in her entire life Monica has talked about actual labor instead of public relations. Next, Valerie walks in. She arrived in a compact economy car, the one she bought after she sold her luxury SUV to pay down the massive debt she owes me. She has a manila folder tucked under her arm. She looks thinner, but not from some trendy starvation diet. It's the lean look of a woman stressed out by having to balance a real-world budget. "Here is this month's deposit, Mother," she says, sliding a bank receipt onto the table. "And the austerity plan for my house. I cut the landscaping service and the kids' horseback riding lessons. They're playing in the municipal soccer league now." "And what do the kids think about that?" I ask, remembering how my grandsons used to look at me with outright disgust. "They cried at first," Valerie confesses, looking down. "But last weekend, my oldest scored his first goal. They were thrilled. Honestly, I think it's good for them to play on real dirt instead of synthetic turf." Finally, Susan arrives. She is the one who has changed the most. Her face, which used to be caked in makeup to hide the crushing emptiness of her life, is scrubbed clean and radiates a totally different kind of glow. She smells like unscented soap and industrial disinfectant. She just got back from the St. Jude's facility. "Hi, Mom," she says softly, leaning down to kiss my forehead. She used to be repulsed by the touch of my old skin. Now she does it with absolute natural affection. "How are my friends up at St. Jude's?" I ask. "Mr. Anselmo passed away yesterday," Susan says, her voice cracking. I watch a genuine tear roll down her cheek. "I stayed by his bed until the very end. I held his hand because he didn't have any family left. He told me I was an angel." Susan covers her mouth, deeply moved. "Nobody has ever said anything like that to me, Mom. I was always just somebody's daughter or somebody's wife. Up there, I'm Susan. I'm useful. I washed bedsheets. I spoon-fed 3 ladies who can't move their arms, and I read the morning paper to a blind man. I'm exhausted. My back is killing me, but I am sleeping better than I have in my entire life." I close the accounting ledger and set it on the table. I take off my glasses. I look at the 3 of them, my 3 little girls. The 3 women I raised poorly, giving them the world to spare them from suffering, and whom I had to completely break in order to put back together. "Serve yourselves," I order. "Lunch is on me today. I made beef stew." We eat in total peace. My grandkids, who used to run around screaming and demanding things, now sit quietly and clear their own plates when they finish. Valerie has drilled it into their heads that Grandma isn't a piece of furniture. She is the captain of the ship, and if the captain gets angry, the ship goes down. When the coffee is poured, Julian clears his throat. "That's the cue, girls," I say, and the room falls dead silent. It has been a 6-month trial period. You have cried, you have thrown tantrums, and you have sweat. You have paid rent to live in the house you were born in, and you have worked to pay for the food you put in your mouths. They tense up. They are waiting for the verdict. Am I going to kick them out? Am I going to give it all back? "I have made a final decision regarding the future of my estate," I announce. Monica's hands ball into fists on the tablecloth. The old glimmer of greed tries to peek through, but she forces it down quickly. "I am not giving you back control of my accounts," I say sharply. I watch their shoulders slump. "But I am also not going to leave you out in the cold when I die." I wave a hand at Julian, who slides a blue folder to each of them. "I have legally established the Ones Who Are in the Way Foundation. 90% of my total assets, including the textile factory, the commercial real estate, and this very house, will instantly transfer ownership to the foundation the moment I die. The foundation's sole purpose will be to build and fully fund dignified assisted living facilities for abandoned senior citizens, equipped with vocational workshops so they can feel useful until their very last day." "And us?" Valerie asks, tearing through the legal jargon with ravenous eyes. "You will be employees of the foundation," I declare. "Monica, you will run the workshops and manage the retail sale of the handcrafted goods the seniors make. You will use your talent for selling, but you will sell dignity, not vanity. Valerie, you will head the financial administration. I want every single penny audited. If a dime goes missing, you are out on the street. And you, Susan, you will be the director of operations for the facilities. You have the heart for it. Now that you've finally found it." The 3 of them are speechless. It is not the multi-million-dollar inheritance they were banking on to blow on European vacations and diamonds. It is an inheritance of labor, an inheritance of heavy responsibility. "You will receive a salary," I continue. "A very good, highly competitive market salary. You will be able to live comfortably, pay for good schools, and take modest vacations. But you will never listen to me very carefully. You will never be filthy rich simply because you carry my last name. If you want wealth, you are going to have to earn it by serving others." Susan is the first to look up. She is smiling through her tears. "I love it, Mom. I really do." Valerie nods slowly, the gears turning as she runs the numbers. "It's a guaranteed income, and it's a real purpose." I accept. Monica is the hardest holdout. She stares at the legal document for a long time. Then she looks down at her hands, calloused and roughed up by the grueling work of the last 6 months. "I just wanted to be important, Mom. I wanted people to admire me." "People admire those who build, sweetheart, not those who spend," I reply softly. "With this foundation, you are going to build something actually worth remembering." Monica takes a deep breath and nods. "Okay, you have a deal." I stand up from the table. My knees ache. Age doesn't forgive, but I feel lighter than I have in decades. I have unstitched the old moth-eaten garment of my family, and I have tailored a brand new one. It is a work uniform, made of heavy-duty canvas, double-stitched, so it will never tear again. I walk out into the garden, leaving them at the table to hash out the operational details with Julian. The late afternoon sun washes over my rose bushes. I walk over to the high stone wall that separates my property from the street, the wall that protects my world. I remember the bus terminal. I remember the paralyzing fear, the dry mouth, the crushing sensation of being treated like garbage. I am profoundly grateful for that moment. If they hadn't broken my heart that day, I never would have found the iron strength to fix their broken lives. Sometimes a mother's love isn't a soft, warm hug. Sometimes it is a violent shove to force your children to walk down the right path. I pull out my cell phone, the sleek, modern one, the one that is no longer a secret. Because now everybody knows that Grandma Eleanor sees all and knows all. I dial the number for the Mother Superior at St. Jude's. Mother, it's Eleanor. Get the rooms ready. I'm sending the first delivery truck tomorrow morning with brand new orthopedic mattresses. Yes. And please tell Mr. Anselmo, may he rest in peace, that his death was not in vain. He taught my daughter how to be a human being. I hang up. The wind rustles through the leaves of the oak tree. I am Eleanor. I am 79 years old. I was a seamstress. I was a victim. And I was a judge. But today, looking through the glass doors and seeing my 3 daughters sitting together, reviewing paperwork and actually planning how to help other people, I feel like I am finally the one thing I always wanted to be. A mother who leaves behind a legacy that cannot be spent, stolen, or lost in a bad bet. I look down at my hands one last time. They have age spots. They have deep wrinkles. They tremble just a little bit. But they are no longer gripping a cheap blue plastic suitcase filled with contempt. They are holding the invisible thread that binds this family together, a thread that I spun myself with infinite patience, agonizing pain, and an unbreakable will of solid steel. The needle has made its final stitch, and the knot is tied tight. Now I can finally rest.